I'm going to illustrate now the determination of the profit maximizing quantity for imperfectly competitive industries, firms competing in those industries. And I'll do that originally by simply setting pure competition across from monopoly as these two opposite cases. But keep in mind that what we talk about with monopoly is the same sort of structural issue with this negative price effect forcing a marginal revenue curve to the left and steeper, having a steeper slope typically than the demand curve. And that concept applies not only to monopoly but to monopolistic competition and oligopoly. So it really is sort of a form which you should all get familiar with. So to talk about the issue here concerning the determination of price, first of all, we revisit the model of demand and supply in perfect competition. And we have an equilibrium price, a market-determined price, that we'll simply call P sub C, in other words, the competitive price. And we'll talk about how that differs from any firm in imperfect competition that is able to charge a price that allows it to earn positive economic profit and thereby earn a monopolistic price. Because even monopolistic competition firms, at least in the short run, given brand strength, product differentiation, high demand for its products relative to available substitutes, can command a monopoly price that is a higher than competitive market price. And the same goes with oligopoly as well. So this form is pretty interesting. So think about this. All firms in all industries will produce the profit maximizing quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and that happens to be right here. So this is the profit maximizing quantity for a firm in monopoly or monopolistic competition or oligopoly. And something interesting happens with regard to this. So think about this. There's marginal revenue, marginal cost. And what does a firm do in such an instance? It basically produces this quantity, because anything to the left means that there's marginal profit not being earned, and anything to the right is there's marginal profit being given back up by overproduction. So this is the point where the firm wants to be, this point of production. And it will mark the price of the good up to meet the demand that exists, the quantity demand that exists for that quantity, and as a result establish a price that we'll simply call a monopoly price. So notice that price is higher than the competitive price, which is the point at which which demand equals supply. And for all intents and purposes, the marginal cost curve for this firm is its supply curve, upward sloping, dollars against quantity. By the way, we will sort of revert to putting dollars on the vertical axis going forward, simply because of the fact we're overlaying. It's not just the price of the good now, we're also overlaying cost. But everything that we're graphing here is defined in terms of dollars on this particular axis. Okay? So this is what the firm will do. It'll mark the price up and it'll charge a premium price. So how does monopoly then differ from perfect competition? And that is the sense of a higher price than in perfect competition. And also keep in mind where the quantity would be in perfect competition. The equilibrium quantity here is simply determined by the intersection of demand and supply, so that we trace that down to the quantity axis, so where demand equals supply. And so as a result, we would have a similar point here, which we'll simply call the competitive quantity. And this quantity here we can simply refer to, even though it isn't indeed the profit maximizing quantity, it's also a monopoly quantity. Okay? So as a result, what can we say about the main effects of monopolies? Number one, higher price than for perfect competition. A price here as opposed to the perfectly competitive price, purely competitive price there. Lower quantities than in pure competition, quantity here as opposed to quantity there. And also the creation of something that has not yet been discussed very much, and that is a creation of sort of a dead zone here that we refer to as a dead weight loss. A dead weight loss. And the dead weight loss is this shaded region. And the best definition of a dead weight loss is the idea that no value is really being created, either for the demand side or the supply side. It's sort of a vacuum. Nothing really dwells there in terms of value, because the monopolist could produce this amount of output and earn this much more revenue by producing more, but chooses not to, because the logical place for all firms in all industries is to produce where marginal revenue was marginal cost. That determines the optimal or profit maximizing output level. But there's a dead weight loss being created, and we're saying that's an inefficiency. And economists often say that dead weight losses are not efficient for anyone. In fact, it's a loss to society, or more concretely to both sides of the market. And then finally, because some of this is a cutaway from what would be consumer surplus, we say that there's a reduction in consumer surplus. Again, that region that's defined as the value that would be obtained by buyers who are willing and able to pay a price greater than the market price, but don't have to. And part of that region is sheared away by the existence of a deadweight loss. And so these are the main effects of monopolies, and not just monopolies, also for monopolistically competitive firms, particularly in the short run, as they're able to command a higher price than what the purely competitive market would be, and also for oligopolies, when they're able also to command a higher price than what is available under pure competition. So when we talk about imperfect competition, those final three market structures as they're presented in the text, even though it sounds like they may be an anomaly, imperfectly competitive, and therefore there's something wrong or unusual or abnormal, and in fact, a very substantial amount of the output in our economy is produced by firms engaging in industries which are imperfectly competitive. In the final video I'll get to here, we'll talk about profitability for these particular kinds of structures, and we'll talk about both losses and profits, and what's to be expected for imperfectly competitive industries.